Good morning.
All right, so Judy's look like it's gonna be coming on board.
Waiting.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm doing good. How are you? Good.
We're live? Okay, great. Well, thank you all for coming to the October 5th meeting of the Audit Committee. I'd like to first call the meeting to order in the absence of our Chair, Commissioner Fisher, not being here today, but we do have 4 other members. And as far as an attendance, we are set to go ahead and conduct business. But one of those first items would need to be electing a temporary chair for today's meeting. If I can have a motion and a second to nominate someone for a temporary chair.
So I have a motion to nominate Carol.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
All right.
Commissioner Myers.
Great. We have, you have attendance roll in here. Would you like, why don't we just go around and, make sure we all know who's here, and especially because we have, some visitors or a new member of the team here.
Okay.
So I'm Carol Myers, District 8 Commissioner and serving on the Audit Committee.
Sir Nona Thomas, community member.
I'm Judy Johnston. I'm management analyst with the audit's office.
I'm Beth Higgins, a community member of the audit committee.
Carl Blunt Communities.
And Gavin Hasper, internal auditor, and I'd certainly like to acknowledge the presence of Mayor Gertz, as well as Executive Assistant Christine. Thank you all for being here. Glad to be here.
Okay. We'll move on to then the next item on the agenda, which is review and approval of the meeting minutes. Does anyone have any changes, or can I have a motion to approve them?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Oop, we're moving through here quickly. Okay. And I think now we're gonna hand it back to Gavin with a review of the updated list of previous audits conducted.
Thank you, Commissioner Myers. So if you all recall, sort of at the end of our meeting, as we were discussing the work plan and considering different topics and departments for that plan, I think it might have been Dr. Thomas that rightfully asked if we could get an updated list for the previous audits, as well as some of those departments, offices, courts, and their divisions that it might be missing from that list. And so what I did is update that list. There really wasn't too much missing. We included some onboarded offices over the last few years under the manager's office, like inclusion, GIO, sustainability. Those are all listed. Went through a number of our courts and added those to the list as well. Essentially, anything that was added still didn't have a previous audit attached to it. So that's probably the reason it was missing from the list in the first place, is there wasn't an audit conducted, but at least we have a comprehensive list now of all departments, offices, and courts. So that's what was taken care of with that. Any questions about that list or anything? Okay.
Gavin, I'm just gonna move it, you can keep going because you're
Okay.
you're in charge of all E, F, and G on this, so.
Sure. So next item on the agenda, letter E, other audits, reviews, and accreditations. Again, at the last meeting, I think for your own consideration and sort of research as we go through this process, I did reach out to all of our departments, offices, and courts to formally request that they provide me with any information they have on external audits that are not conducted by the auditor's office. So anything that is aligned with professional organizations for those specific departments, if they're accredited by an agency, does that agency require some sort of audit or review? Do they, on their own, initiate some sort of external audit every so often, every couple of years for various topics or programs? And then also, based on what they do, the nature of what they do, is there another authority that they have to answer to with respect to audits. So some of our courts, for example, being affiliated with the state of Georgia, are subject to those audits as well. So reached out to them, had a discussion at the manager's office, meeting a couple weeks ago with those departments. And I've been receiving some feedback so far, probably around 45% feedback right now. We are in the process of putting that in a spreadsheet for you all to be reviewed possibly at the next meeting. I don't have it for you today just because it's incomplete at this time, but I hope to have that for you at the next meeting. I will say that with respect to some of the audits we're going to consider later on for this fiscal year, I did receive feedback from most of those departments. And I don't think any of the feedback that I received necessarily duplicates what we're attempting to do with those departments. I think that was certainly a concern of ours, is to make sure that we're not duplicating efforts with certain departments that are already subject to an audit. And although they may be subject to an audit, the type of audit that is done by an external agency isn't exactly the same as what we're proposing to do. So any questions at all about that? And again, I apologize, we don't have all that information, but we are getting it.
Frankly, I'm somewhat surprised by that an outside auditor, especially an external auditor, would be doing something similar to what we would be doing. I mean, obviously it must be less rigorous than what we would be doing. Is that correct?
Well, what it is the departments that do conduct an external audit are doing so based on a specific program, division, or project. So for example, if you have a department with multiple divisions, and let's just take HR, for example. They have a risk management division within HR that is, in charge of the comprehensive insurance for Athens-Clarke County from a liability standpoint, as well as, just our motor vehicles, as well as any claims against the government and our contracts. So with that comes a specific audit related to our provider. That doesn't necessarily mean they're looking at every division within that department though. And same.
No one's all, not to interrupt you, but
Yeah.
nothing's all encompassing.
Correct. That's correct.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions regarding item number E or letter E? Sorry. Okay. And I do want to acknowledge, Manager Williams joined us. Thank you, sir.
Sorry, I apologize for being late.
That's all right. So we'll move on to letter F then, the FY 24 audit work plan activity. So what I've sent you all is a draft. It's certainly up for discussion today. But you had asked me after the last meeting to take some of the results of that matrix that I put together earlier, and with a realistic focus on what we think we can handle and accomplish within the remaining fiscal year, acknowledge some of the scores in that matrix, but put together a list that picks one of those items from a major audit standpoint, a really detailed audit, that we expect to take possibly up to 6 months to complete. But it's one of those topics that we really want to get into details and focus on. You had also mentioned, though, that perhaps we start to take audits in a different direction going forward. That instead of looking at 1 to 2 major audits per year, and essentially that's it, what about some quick glances at various departments throughout the year that give us an opportunity to get on a regular basis with all of our departments, so that we don't go 30 years without a single audit of a department? That essentially every department, office, or court will be touched in some capacity over a shorter time span, possibly 5 to 6 years. And so that is what you've asked for, and that's what I attempted to provide you with, is a recommendation for 1 major comprehensive performance audit and 3 minor audits that are more of your internal controls checking points. I think when you take a look at the schedule, if we are able to approve that today and bringing it forward to the mayor and commission for a vote, it's possible we could be on the October, November cycle, November, December at the latest. We're essentially then 6 months into this fiscal year with 6 months remaining. I would strongly like to keep a fiscal year schedule with our audits. And so all that in consideration, that's the level of work that I think our office can handle, is one major audit and 3 minor ones to finish out this year. Obviously, next year, when we have a full fiscal year, we'll look to accomplish more, but I think right now, that's where we're at. One more quick note before, I certainly want to hear y'all's opinions on this. The matrix that I sent out didn't really change, with the exception of adding some initial color coding to that first column there, the purple and the yellow under the topics. And what I think is important to point out is that although we're only considering one major audit out of that group, the 3 minor audits in some way are associated with those other remaining topics that are highlighted. And I think that's a way for us to feel comfortable with the fact that although there were 12 and we're only looking at one major one, there are 3 minors that will in some capacity highlight some of those other topics. It may not be an in-depth focused audit of those specific topics, but the departments in question that I've put before you are related in some capacity to those other highlighted. So I think we're able to sort of knock out a few more indirectly. But that's where we're at. I'd certainly like to hear your opinions and for you to consider approving this if we're in that comfort level today. If not, we can certainly take a look at it next month. But we are prepared that if you do take a vote today, to try and get this on the agenda for the next mayor and commission cycle. So.
I have a question for you, Gavin. I'm looking over this, which is, I'm very excited about this. And if I look at the comprehensive one, which is the first,
Gerald, I'm sorry, what are you looking at?
I'm looking at this document that starts here.
What's it called?
It's called this one here.
Okay.
So then you go to the second full page, and that's where you see the recommendation.
Okay, yes, okay.
And the way I'm seeing it, that's right. No, that's fine. This is, basically you have, I believe, 4 charts for 4 different departments. The first one on the first page is the comprehensive performance audit. Then you have I want to find a better word for that. Like the
I struggle myself.
overview audit, the quick, something or other audit. And there's 3 of those, one for housing and community development, one for economic development, and one for tax assessor. Just on a visual, the minor, the quicker audits have a lot more detail in them. And then the one on the front has, just as the scope is the 7, where the scope here is 5, the other ones have 5, but all these minor points in here. Could you somehow give an example? I guess that's a whole department, so how the comprehensive one with the shorter list will it entail the same things as the minor ones and then go on beyond that? And what will it go into beyond what's in this very comprehensive list here?
Sure. No, I think
As
that's
an
a great
example.
question, Commissioner, and I do have an answer for that. So what you also notice is on those other 3 minor audits, essentially the scope and the objective are the same at this point in time. And again, I think that's to bring some regularity to those minor audits, that as we go forward and as we try to get every single department within a certain time frame, obviously the scope can change over time, but what I wanted to do is provide basically almost some yes and no answer types, objectives and define scope. And so I think it's easy to go through that list, although it does look longer. to ask for that information for the departments. They essentially should have it readily available and check the box. Yes, this is what you have. No, you don't have it. And then provide, a little bit of analysis based on that. And that differs from the first page, which has a larger objective, but then, 7 items potentially for the scope. We're going to be spending a lot of time on that major audit, and those 7 items under the scope are going to help lead us in that initial direction. But I fully expect that we're going to start incorporating under those 7 some of the objectives that you find in those other minor audits. Also, depending on you all as a committee and how we check in monthly, whether or not we need to go more in depth under these 7 broader scope items. But I think they're very encompassing for the time being. And I'll certainly, look to amend those if you think something is missing or not captured within those comprehensive scope items 1 through 7. But I agree, it looks deceiving, but at the same time, it's still gonna be a comprehensive.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note, I mean, this is obvious if I'm looking at it more closely, but in the minor audits, it's a whole department. And again, here, that's where it's could be a little confusing. Here, it's a whole department. If I go back to the first one, the department is human resources, but we're not looking at all of human resources. We're looking at employee recruitment, hiring, and orientation. So you're taking one mission of that department and you're exploring it in a lot greater detail. Okay.
And we'll build out kind of more of that scope, excuse me, as we go.
Yes.
Whereas with the others, you've kind of outlined it already for us, but with this one, once we decide this is what we want and we start having discussion, some of those subcategories would be built out from us.
That's correct. That's a good point, Dr. Thomas, that, when we have these minor audits, I wanted to be as detailed as possible because we are only planning to be there for a few weeks and produce something within a few weeks thereafter. I don't want to have to come back to you all month after month for a minor audit and sort of drag out that timeline saying, hey, this was just a general scope. Now we need to get more details. I kind of want that checklist ready to go. Whereas obviously with a more in-depth audit of a major program, we're going to be checking in regularly with you all on what we found and how we're progressing with our analysis. And certainly you may have some questions going forward and say, hey, well, based on what you just reported, do we need to get a little finer detail within some of those existing scope items, but hash things out a little bit more, so.
I mean, obviously, it's just my opinion, but since it's a very important topic of the day, I just want to let my thoughts be known on this. I don't see any reason why we couldn't make our decision about the projects today. But I think the information is presented very well. And you've done an exemplary job in laying this out. So I would most certainly, I would be in a position to make a decision.
I want to.
Yeah.
I just have one question. So I agree. You outlined it so well. It's almost self-approving. The questions that I had was the analysis from the other perspective of the organizations that are being audited. So is there like a measure of the burden for the departments on both what we classify as the major and the minor audits in terms of the amount of time and work that it takes to complete these audits? So the comprehensive one, for example, we saw the work plan and how detailed and the process that has to go through. So that kind of is the reason why it takes 6 months to do it, right? But the amount of time from both your office in terms of to complete the work hours that it takes to do it, or what your anticipation for work hours, and then from the organization, how many hours it take to support the analysis of the organization. So that would be especially for the minor ones. I would maybe rename it the periodic ones.
Sure.
So we're trying to kind of create an environment, an audit environment, that there's an expectation that they can be audited in a certain period of time, depending on the size of the department. So that might be a name. I'm trying to think of one that might If they don't want to say minor audit, because there's no such thing. but-
Right, and it just, it seems to,
So if there's a kind of a concept of how many, so if a department knows they're gonna be audited, how much time it will take for them to be able to support that audit. I mean, as you mentioned in the last meeting, most departments really do or should want these audits because it gives them a perspective, it gives them an outside eye to what's happening, and particularly for performance, whether they're able to achieve their performance objectives based on the resources that they have. And that's something that, of course, the audit should help them be able to document.
Yes.
And I think even in those organizations that are doing a very good job, you never know what each individual in the organization is doing. And all of a sudden you do an audit and you realize, hey, why is that occurring? It's just something no one ever thought about. So, another reason periodically just look, see, make
So from
sure.
the compliance side and from the performance side, absolutely. I agree with you. Oh.
Well, to answer your question, Beth, our goal is not to burden or overburden the departments. We fully understand and acknowledge being a department ourselves, some of the strain that they can be under with just their daily activity. So much like an open records request, let's just say, we're going to approach them. We're going to ask them for resources that hopefully are readily available. We're not necessarily asking them to create documents from scratch that don't exist. We're wanting to look at what do you have? And if you don't have it, is there a reason why you don't have it? But I certainly don't anticipate going to a department and saying, hey, I'm interested in seeing this. And although I think you should have it, if you don't, I need you to start working on that and get it taken care of in 2 months. That's not our goal. Certainly we would highlight the fact that we think that's an important thing that may be missing. But yeah, I mean, for the sake of time, we wouldn't be able to ask them to start creating something. And honestly, that starts to blur the lines between our review aspect versus an operational one that the manager would look over and decide. But also, because of the detail in those periodic audits, that, again, we're looking to hopefully just check the box, acknowledge that you do or don't do this, and if you don't, we will detail why that is. I think that is still going to follow, in general, the process and workflow that you saw in those charts last time, but it's going to be at a more expedited pace. When it comes to the other comprehensive audit, things are naturally going to run a little bit slower because of the level of detail that's going to be involved. We are going to be likely conducting interviews, possibly surveys, in association with that comprehensive audit that will take time. I don't anticipate us, conducting a survey for one of those periodic audits. It may be a recommendation after that says, okay, we took a quick look at this. Here are some concerns that we have. And they may warrant a future comprehensive audit that involves surveys. But yeah, I think we're well aware of the fact that there will be 2 different timelines. I still think they'll follow the same flow chart, but at an expedited pace.
I do have a question on this. I mean, that's helpful for me to hear because I assume you'll be asking for documents and perhaps going along with what Beth is suggesting, having some anticipated. I mean, I assume even for these, what do we do for periodic audits, just use your
I wrote it
phrase.
down.
Yeah, I got it. That there would be some interviews with people as well. So I think that's an interesting point to be keeping track of that or giving some guidelines about expected time from the department. On this, I mean, what we're looking at approving is this here and moving on to the commission for full approval there. So I want to ask you something just as an example here. If I'm looking at the housing and community development one, and this is me anticipating that a commissioner might ask about this. So, and as the mayor and the manager who is here know, there's been a lot of questions about the flow from the approval of the approval of, well, I don't even know the direction to approve a contract with a certain nonprofit, for example, and then the actual time period between that vote and when the money gets out to that person. And I'm just wondering if that would, like, for me, I'd be wondering what that process is, so I could better understand it. Would that kind of thing be in the review standard operating, like 2E or something?
Mhm.
That there'd have to be sort of like, give us the process there. So I just, I'm anticipating that my fellow commissioners might ask whether or not that will be covered in this periodic audit.
I do think it will, but to a limited degree. So obviously that was a separate topic in the matrix that you all saw.
Uh-huh.
What I would say is a periodic audit will take a look at some of the standard operating procedures and processes associated with one of their functions, which is to distribute funds based on
Mhm.
allocation. And although it won't get into, okay, there are 60 organizations that receive funds and this is how much they got, and each individual one took 30 to 90 days, we will ask in general,
Yeah.
okay, what is the average turnaround time for distributing and what does that process look
Right.
like? So that we can.
Yeah,
at least-
and that's more what,
Yeah.
I mean, that's more what I would be seeking in that. And then the other thing is from this, audit work plan topic scoring matrix with the new colors in here. And you're saying the topics indirectly associated with the proposed minor audits.
Mhm.
I see how the neighborhood leaders and the nonprofit funding would be in the HCD audit, and then perhaps the comprehensive grant management. And I'm assuming the complete, but could you help me with the 6 and 7? 7, I'm assuming is with the tax assessor. But how does the Classic Center Arena project, where does that, where are you seeing that
Well,
being
so I
connected
think,
to any of these?
yeah, that's a good point, but, Classic Center Arena, for the vastness that involves that project, although, again, we're not gonna look at it from the point that we originally proposed, given that it is related to economic development, TAD
Mhm.
districts, I think that's where we align it with the possibility of doing a periodic audit of
Mhm.
the economic development department. Our economic development department, underwent a change roughly, 10, 15 years ago, having gone from the foundation to its own in-house, department. And although I don't have any reason to be concerned, obviously,
Mhm.
I do think it's important that as a newer department that's going on 10 to 15 years in age, that it do have some sort of,
Mhm.
audit,
Right.
to make sure that we're just, again, checking the box with some of these activities. And I think it also will, indirectly give us a quick glance of how it deals with some of these major projects and the TAD funding. So the alignment of number 6 in specific, is specifically to economic development.
Yeah, I thought that's the one that seems, I mean, in terms of, and how about 7, is that the?
Yeah, so I would say 7 again is, not only indirect to tax assessor, but also, again, I think the economic development.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Classic Center Arena project seems a little bit of a stretch in terms of what, I'd make that a real light purple.
Okay.
But I mean, you may be able to persuade, I mean, it's not the most important thing here, but.
I think, again, and you're right, it was just an attempt to show you that although we may only be choosing one out of those 12, there is an opportunity, I think, for us to look at it in a different way, that we're actually touching upon, a half dozen
Mhm.
of some of those topics, as not to just say we're only picking one and we're throwing all the rest out. I think there's an opportunity to say that we are indirectly working on some of those.
I think we do though need to remain cognizant of the fact that we don't want to stretch ourselves too thin. But I think worse than not doing an audit is doing one and slap dashboard.
Yes.
And can I assume that you discussed this with Commissioner Fisher?
I did.
Okay.
Commissioner Fisher and I sat down before he left and, went over not only, the agenda, but also the topics within the work plan. And I think he was at a comfort level, with those selected topics.
Well, unless there's other discussion, can I get a motion?
I'm not asking for a motion.
Okay, let's recognize County Manager Williams.
Thank you, and I appreciate the comments that were said earlier. Beth, you had brought up, that would be the only thing that just, what would you think the burden would be from a reporting on HR particularly? I think the periodic audits are, I think these are all great ideas. Let me just say that. I do know that with the pay study, you know, they're gonna be pretty involved, and just like all our other departments are short-staffed, so I'm not expecting a particular number, but the reporting burden, how do you see the workflow going and as far as taxing your own staff?
Sure. With respect to HR, what I would say is, this very focused audit on employee recruitment, hiring and orientation, that's the main focus. And so I want to acknowledge the fact that, as Manager Williams just pointed out, there is a separate pay study being conducted. That's not something we want to blur the lines with. We're not going to burden them with trying to ask for reasons why certain jobs are being paid a certain salary. That's a different topic. Same with even job descriptions, I would say. You know, it's easy when you start getting into the weeds with this stuff to say, well, you know, what about the specific job descriptions? Maybe that impacts our recruiting and hiring. And I won't disagree that they may have some impact, but again, I don't think we need to get into, you know, 1,000 different job descriptions. And there's no way to do that within the time frame that we've allocated. So what I would say from a burden standpoint is we will be spending some time with HR. We acknowledge the fact that as we're auditing them, they are still going to be going about their daily operations of trying to hire people and having interviews and things like that. So we'll try to be cognizant of their schedule and respectful. But my hope is that we'll be able to see and receive existing operating procedures, existing policies, existing ordinances, and that they aren't forced to come up with information that doesn't exist at the moment. So, I don't know if that fully answers your question, Manager, but.
Well, just being cognizant that, obviously they've got a lot of things going on too, and I know, Gavin, with your experience, that you're very thoughtful about that. And I'll share this just in, so because of the mayor having participated in some previous Harvard Bloomberg city leadership initiatives, we've gotten on their radar and they offer resources and we try and take advantage of it. And most recently, we were awarded a Harvard Fellow, somebody they would pay for 2 years to come down here, and we made an application for that. And our application was on recruitment and retention of workforce, because that's our biggest issue. So we're gonna have this person in residence, paid for by Harvard, waking up every day thinking about doing those things. Went through the whole process, took applications, interviewed folks, offered it to a person, and at the last minute, they accepted, they were coming first day, and then their spouse took a job in another town, and so they left. And we weren't able to backfill that. So we were already interested in this. It's obviously a plaguing problem for many organizations, so I appreciate that, you know, any wisdom that you can impart, and just, you know, other than just the time involved, you know, I don't have any issues. I think these are all responsible audits.
Following up on that, before I ask for this motion again, I would assume, and I can't, well, you know, I would assume that, since this has to do with the hiring and orientation, and that there will be some, there will be some discussion with departments as well, from the department perspective. Is that included in here?
Yeah,
And
I think it falls under one of those 7, yes, but, you know, it's not specifically pointed out, but yes, we do.
well, I'm just thinking in
anticipate-
terms of in staff time, I would expect you to be sampling some departments to find out what the perspective is from the people who are needing the jobs.
Yes.
filled. Okay, so now we have a motion to approve this, recommended, FY 24 audit work plan to move forward to the, mayor and commission for approval. Motion,
Make a motion.
second. Okay, we have a motion from Carl Blunt and a second from Zenona Thomas. All in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously. Wonderful.
Thank you, Commissioner. One thing I did want to just quickly follow up, now that we have voted to move this forward. I did send you all yesterday, and I apologize. It was some late work, but I saw an opportunity essentially that if we were to pass something today,
Mhm.
to still make it to the October, November cycle. And so I did a
Yes.
rough draft for you. That, you know, I know Commissioner Myers is familiar with this, but for those that are not, there is typically a set template that we provide to the mayor and commission. But certainly, any of the content in there that you may have questions or think is missing, and we will attach the full draft of the work plan to it. Let me know and I can make those changes before I put that in the cycle.
I would like to ask, Gavin, if this, and maybe this is also for the manager, do we expect this to just go onto the agenda or is this going on to a work session as well?
I wouldn't anticipate it being a work session. You know, certainly if that feedback was heard during the vote, you know, we would certainly consider that, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory. And, from what at least I've seen in the past, I don't believe all of these have gone before a work session before. So I think it would just be an
Yeah.
item on the agenda.
And, Auditor Gavin, he's already submitted that. It's on there. And I think it was reviewed as title only, or it will be reviewed with the agenda setting team and the mayor next Wednesday. So if your vote, you know, you're an advisory committee to the mayor and commission. So once you take a vote, and we're compelled to bring that forward.
Yeah, and I would, I think it would be helpful sometime in the year, you know, cause I'm immersed in this and was on the transition team. And you've produced so much stuff that's really helpful, documents that are really helpful to have a work session. Perhaps to just go over this with the mayor, with the commissioners, maybe like in some little empty spot, down the road. Just to, and it might be really good to just give that overview, actually sooner than later, but just to go over some of these documents, a process, introduce a staff or whatever, there, because this has been the position's been empty, we're reinstating it, the more informed, the better.
Okay.
That's just, my 2 cents on that.
No, I appreciate that. I think there's a way for us to work into a work session with that.
Yeah.
You know, I would like to still obviously bring this forward.
Yeah.
And keep the train moving a little bit, but yeah, I will.
Yeah.
I'll talk with Manager Williams about when that might be most appropriate, given some of the work session agendas that I know we have coming. So,
And that could be either November or December. You want to.
Not to, introduce a topic that's not on the agenda, but I did want to hope to see on the next agenda, talking about the very things that you were touching on. So the fact that the office is just reinstating and the progress with hiring and new positions. Oh, sorry.
That's actually we're getting some of that on this agenda.
On
after
on
this.
his audit.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
update. But I was thinking about, FY 25's audit work plan. We just finished this one, but thinking the next year
Yeah.
to, that where we are in the budget process for, for new personnel,
Right.
for, contract assistance. We talked about that last time. And for possibly looking at software assistance for developing, you know, internal control or audit, our periodic audit system, that if we had, a good audit software program that could be used. citywide, that would be a couple of
Mhm.
topics for budget things, but I just didn't know where we were in the budget process.
When is your budget submitted?
So more than likely, all departments will start receiving, some notices from the finance department by the end of the month, early November, regarding FY twenty-five budget
Okay.
proposals.
So
And
it's just, we're just beginning.
Yep, so, by the next meeting, I can certainly put that on the agenda, to talk about where we anticipate going with some of our requests. Those are typically due from each department around January, start of the year. And, so there's time certainly for us to discuss it and think about it, but I can bring that up at the, next agenda, and hopefully I'll have some more information for you regarding how we're looking for next year, from a budget standpoint.
I know you gotta get in early.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes,
That's-
yes. But to your point, Ms. Higgins, that, even regarding the software, I can certainly elaborate a little bit more at the next agenda, but what I will say is we are currently, in the process of sort of doing a trial of a software program, for auditing, and that was put in place by my predecessor. We are in the essentially the last year of that contract. And although I won't make any decisions right now, and, you know, I'm trying to remain open about it, what we are gonna have to balance as a department is the effectiveness of that software program against also the price that we're paying for it. Because it may very well be, you know, a great tool to have. We're still looking into that and sort of playing around with it. But at the same time, if that frees up budget that could otherwise be put towards external, you know, consultants, staff, or other items, that's something that I need to consider. You know, because at the same time, if we're able to effectively produce documents and analysis without a software program, you know, using good old fashioned Word, Excel, PowerPoint, things like that. You know, I think as long as the end product is still getting done on time, the means are a little bit less for me, especially considering the budget. But yes, we are already in that process. We have a subscription to a software
Is
program.
it out of bounds for me to ask how much that software?
No, I mean, it's certainly public knowledge, but I can get you the exact figure, but essentially, there was an initial startup cost, you know, with, like any software package, there's an implementation cost. And I wanna say, just off the top of my head here, roughly 20,000 for that. And then there's an annual subscription of, I wanna say about 10,000. And so, we are paid in full at the moment. And so I do have to make a decision in the coming months as to whether we're gonna try to renew that subscription. It may anticipate it being at a higher cost and a new contract, or do we just give notice to the contract that we are not renewing? But yeah, I mean, from a budgetary standpoint, based on our allocation, you know, being a smaller department, that amount of money can be significant, you know? So, yeah, we're gonna look at different options with that. That's a good point. I'm sure you'll make a right decision.
Well, to touch on that too, so thinking about, internal control budgets and for all the things that you need, I was trying to think in my head, is there a model for the size government we have, the size budget that we have, the size complexity that we have in terms of what an internal control auditor program should look like in terms of what it should be budgeted for? I mean, I'm sure there's and I'm sure there's a huge range, but based on those criteria, I'm sure there's kind of a target amount that it should cost to provide an internal audit program for a government of this size and complexity.
Yeah, and what I can say is there was an RFP process that took place a couple of years ago prior to me coming on board. That did receive, I believe, multiple options to choose from. And the previous auditor did, you know, go through some of those options and eventually brought their decision to the mayor and commission for approval. So this
I
was.
mean, that's just for the software program, but I mean for
Yeah.
the entire audit
Yeah.
program.
Oh,
what it
yeah.
should Cost, you know,
Yeah.
what in general, and then how you allocate those costs to satisfy the functions is of course your
Yeah.
job, right?
Correct,
Yeah.
correct. So,
Yeah.
no, it's a good question, but I can certainly come back with a budget status at the next meeting of the well, I mean, with your permission, Chair,
Let's move on to the
Yeah.
internal auditor's update. Yeah,
okay, well,
and then afterwards, I'd actually like, if we haven't added this, if the mayor, since he's here today, would like to make any comments before we wrap up. I'm just giving you a heads up, so you're thinking about something profound to say.
so internal auditors update, we sort of touched upon some things already, but I do want to again introduce Judy Johnston, as management analyst for the Office of Operational Analysis. She started on Monday, so I'm certainly excited. I could stop talking to myself now, in the office. And I will also say, we were successful in hiring an intern on a part-time basis from UGA. And he started on Monday as well. Now, he's in the office roughly 10 to 12 hours a week. But it's great to go from 0 to 2 staff all of a sudden. Seems small, but it's a lot. And we look forward to what Judy can bring to the office. I'm confident she's gonna do a fantastic job. Just real quickly, Judy has been with the government for about 5 years in total. She just came to us from organizational development. So certainly brings some insight to the government as a whole. And prior to that, she was with Leisure Services, at the Morton Theater. And so, Judy has an MBA and, very qualified, to do this job. So I'm glad to have her on board, as well as our intern. And then I will say that, we are likely to repost, the remaining management analyst job. There are 2 management analysts that are allocated to us, so Judy and then another full-time management analyst, and I'm working with HR as we speak to go ahead and try and repost and, see if we can get some more applicants for that job. From a Public Safety Civilian Oversight Board, Peace Cobb, I know we sort of touched upon our role as a department in that. I did have an opportunity I was invited to speak to the Athens Anti-Discrimination Movement last week, and just brief them on where we are from both an auditing standpoint and a Peace Cobb standpoint. So it was a good discussion that took place, and I think they were happy to be at least updated with where everything was. I know that they were involved and concerned about how things were going, and so I was thankful for that invitation. But from a Peace Cobb standpoint, we are in the process right now of working with them to finalize a misconduct form application. And that is something by the ordinance and by their implementation that is key. So the form itself has been produced. We're just awaiting final direction from them as to how we go about posting it. It will likely be posted on our website and linked to Peace Cobb through the operational analysis website. And we're also talking about the exact flow of that process. It is anticipated that once that complaint form is finalized, any complaints will be funneled through our office to begin with. We will essentially take them in. We will look at them from a completeness standpoint, and from there, we'll sort of disseminate that information to both Peace Cobb and the associated public safety agency that may be the subject of that complaint. I still don't really have hard numbers to give you all from a time standpoint or dedication to that function. I hope to have more of that, obviously, when we initiate that complaint form. I'll be able to tell you, okay, well, now that we've gotten to this step, this is kind of where we're at from a workload standpoint. We're also working with them on a survey, a community survey that they hope to launch. That just gets some information to them about the state of public safety functions within Athens-Clarke County as viewed by our public citizens. So right now, I would say it's probably a 30-70 split at the moment with regard to auditing versus Peace Cobb. So
Would The audit,
auditing taking the majority, the 70% at this
okay,
point. But I
good.
certainly expect that number to change and balance out once we get active with
So
some of these
at
things.
this point, are you, I assume that you were at the last PSCOG meeting, which I've not watched online, but.
The last
are
one
you-
was canceled, but.
Oh,
it was
okay.
filled with the
So
August.
at this point, are you going to involve Judy in that, like, as you're trying to figure out how the staffing is going to be?
Yes,
So that you'll kind of both be on the same page a little bit in terms of division up there?
yes,
in
that's a good
future
question,
ones.
Commissioner, because at the end of the day, for the ordinance, you know, you all as a commission gave that responsibility to me, and I certainly acknowledge that. And so although Judy will be brought up to speed on everything related to both auditing and
Mhm.
PSCOB, as will the rest of the staff, and will certainly assist with those functions,
Sure.
it's not as though I'm going to be turning over, you know, say, all of PSCOB to one of the
Mhm.
management analysts. That responsibility will still lie at the end of the day with me, as does the auditing, but, great to have the help and assistance at least with some of those functions. And then last thing I wanted to talk about, for our newer members that aren't commissioners, there is, some training that is required of our boards, authorities, and commissions. It is a online training, but I did want to let you know that I'm working with our Public Information Office to get you all ACC Gov emails. I know right now you essentially are using your personal emails, but eventually, being a public board and appointed body, we do want to make sure that your contact information, at least from a email standpoint, is posted on the website for anyone who may be concerned, but that is not coming to a personal email. We'll get you some ACC Gov emails, and once that is accomplished, you'll also be in our system then to take some of the online ethics training that is offered by our government. I don't anticipate it taking too much of your time, but it's just one of those things that we want to make sure all of our boards and authorities are operating the way that we need them to. So I'll clarify that by the next meeting once I get more information for you.
And Gavin, I mean, I know I could also ask this of our county manager as such, but when you do that, I'd like to get that.
Okay.
I just wanna see what people are experiencing, because that's now, I mean, I know you gently said it was offered, but it's more or less required.
Yeah.
Right, so, do you know how long that the anticipated time on that is
For the,
for the training?
I've reached out, as soon as we're able to get the email addresses, that then puts them in the system as being able to log in.
Mhm.
So I'm hopeful that I'll hear about this in the next week or two back about the
Okay.
status of that. And then the training is, I'll have to get a little more clarification, but I don't know if the training is only offered at a certain period throughout the year. It's online, but it's only offered as opposed to just being a standing video that's on a website that you can look at anytime. I'll have to get more information.
Is this something that's specific to this particular function? Or so my question is, if we've served on other boards, we have taken that training, and therefore don't need to take.
That's a possibility, that
Okay.
it is a standardized training for all of our boards and commissions. So if you did happen to take an ethics class, I can double check that you may be exempt from that one.
And it's been recent, so, I mean,
Yeah.
Is it like the last year?
yeah, you'd have a memory of it
Oh,
unless.
no, I haven't.
Unless your memory's really
I
bad.
haven't been one of those things been the same for like 10 years.
No.
And last thing, real, quickly, I did hear back from our attorney's office. I know at one point in time, Mr. Blunt, you had asked about, any conflicts of interest. Although I don't anticipate from the work plan that we've put forward that any of you would have any, but certainly if you do have a conflict of interest, bring it to my attention. I can get an exact determination from our attorney's office. But the one that you had asked about the last time with, I think it was Family Connect.
Yeah, family connection from school.
The determination was that, yes, that may be in fact a conflict of interest, but
Okay.
I don't think that's needed anymore now that we're not going that direction. So,
Got it. Thank you for checking.
Thank you. And when you give this update next time, could you also give an update? I can't remember if I talked to you about this anyway, either way, on the professional training for the office, the status of that and the kind of training, did we discuss that or here? I don't think I think I talked to you about it afterwards. So to just give us an update on that.
Well,
as
real quickly, Commissioner Myers, I will make that a regular,
Yeah.
thing, but, I will say that this coming week, I'll actually be attending, the Georgia Government Finance Officers Association, annual meeting here in Athens, actually at the Classic Center. I need it for some of my continuing education credits anyway to maintain my, finance officer certification, but, yes, that is going to take place, with me personally, but I will, now that we have staff, update you on some of that other, those other trainings as well.
Great.
Yes.
And before we wrap up, would the mayor like to make any comments?
Largely just thank you for doing this work. Judy, welcome to this office. We're excited to have you at City Hall. And I've already noted just to, our old veterans are known, just how appreciative I am of them willing to give of their time. I think we get paid for this work, that we take on, and just to have community members who are willing to volunteer and kind of provide some outside eyes and ears and thoughts about what we're doing in our job. Broadly, it's really appreciated.
Do we have any other discussions for the good of the crowd here?
Make a motion to impeach Dexter and make you chair.
That's right, oh, yeah, yeah.
Put that in the minutes.
No,
Yeah.
And that would be, our next meeting then would be at November 2nd, 2023. And just to clarify, if this does, oh no, this would be on the agenda it's actually slated to be on the agenda for,
So, for the work plan?
yeah.
Yeah, so, I'll give you an update, as to the work plan, but the mayor and commission voting meeting will actually be following our November.
Yes, yeah, because of
Second meeting, correct, but.
Right, it'll be November 7th,
Yeah,
I
so
guess.
within days of each other, but I'll certainly let you know if there was anything heard at the agenda setting meeting about, about the topic. So.
Right, and that, of course, is also available to watch online if you'd like to see the first discussion of that. All right, can I have a motion to adjourn then?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you, and the meeting is over.
Well, thank you.
Thank you all.
11:29.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, well, I think it's, we have to give a lot of credit